You are listening to another AlwaysMoto production. The AlwaysMoto podcast with your host, David Hogan. This show contains information about injuries to riders competing in AMA Supercross, AMA Motocross, MXGP, Oz Pro MX, and other international moto events. The information discussed may be unsettling to some listeners. It might be incomplete or based on medical opinions due to riders tending to hide the details of their injuries. We are here to explain the information and increase injury understanding and visibility for the fans. There might be coarse language and the odd stuff up along the way. If any of this offends you, turn us off right now.
I'd like to remind you that he is not a doctor.
That's right, Moto fans. I'm not a doctor, but I am a physiotherapist, and this is episode 39 of the AlwaysMoto podcast. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, David Hogan, the Australian physiotherapist. This is the AlwaysMoto podcast, and we are in the depths of the clinic throwing strapping tape anywhere it will stick, because that's what people tell me physios do, apparently. As always on this show, we'll be going through all things moto, particularly the injuries in our sport, because hashtag injuries are a part of moto. And I should probably add, unfortunately, after that. This week on the show, we'll be talking all things injuries from and the events from round 4 of the Australian Supercross Championship, which wrapped up last weekend there in Wagga. We'll be talking the final emergency department list for the Australian Supercross. We'll also be talking the new additions to the very start of the 2023 pre-season Supercross AMA list that's already got a few guys jumping onto that list, unfortunately. Been a few injuries over there in America already. Of course, we'll have Dave's diatribe, and we've got a bit of a new bit here and a new guest coming on who you will be meeting shortly here on the podcast. But bringing you this show today, as always, Polar Australia. Polar Australia and their incredible range of activity tracking and heart rate monitors, from the H10 chest strap and their top-line GPS multi-sport watches, such as the Polar Grit X Pro and their all-new Ignite 3. You should be checking these things out and using them in your training and in your riding, just to even track where you're going, especially that Polar Grit X Pro. I've been using it recently, and its navigation features are very interesting and very awesome. If you want to go and explore a new section of trail, it can help you get home, which is always a nice thing to know that you've got that little device on the bars there using that bike mount that Polar has. So it's very awesome. The products from Polar are fantastic. Check out the show links, show notes, and you'll find the links to Polar, and you can get your product over there at Polar just in time for Christmas. And they do have, I believe, a bit of a Christmas sale going on if you check out their website. Also, thanks to Slantboard Guy. Don't forget, we have an affiliate deal in place with these guys. Slantboard is offering 10% discount for AlwaysMoto podcast listeners. So if you want to get your squats on point in the gym, improve your standing technique on the bike with stronger legs, this simple equipment piece is for you. Use the code AlwaysMoto in lowercase at checkout. And the link, again, is in the show notes. So go and check out Slantboard Guy. And I've been using this one in the lead up to my surgery that's coming up next week. I'm trying to get my hip and my leg all as good as it can be before I go back into that surgery and have to hit the reset button again. And the amount of different exercises I've been able to do on this little angled board is insane. And it's been quite effective in actually helping me get my squat depth back, which I was struggling a lot with there a couple of weeks ago before that board showed up. I'm quite impressed with it. And, for a small amount of money, use that discount code. It's making a big difference to some of the things I've been doing in the gym in my rehab part. And I can see where it's going to continue to improve things in normal times when I'm not injured as well. So yeah, get on board with those couple of products there, guys, for your training. It's well worth the efforts to get them into your programs. And as always, we still need your show support, generally speaking. We've got two ways to do that. You can buy a T-shirt, an Always Moto T-shirt. They're available now. They're $25 plus postage and handling. We do have international drop ship for our US listeners, so you can order that shirt as well. And we want you to rock those T-shirts at the races so that we can get some Always Moto promotion out there in the world. So if you want a T-shirt, email us at alwaysmoto2019@gmail.com. Put T-shirt order in the subject line and send us the size you want. They do run a little small, these shirts. They're Chinese made, unfortunately. So they are a bit smaller make. So you just go up one size on your order. But send that order through and then we'll get the payments, details and all that sorted out. It's payment via PayPal. And speaking of PayPal, the second option for supporting the show is a donation via PayPal. You can donate pretty much any amount you want. Obviously, the bigger amounts are better. But you can support the show so we can keep putting out this awesome content and keep attending races to be able to bring you the inside information about the injuries and some other information that we get along the way. So jump on the PayPal, send us a donation. When you do send that donation through, please include a question or a comment and we can read that out live on the show. Let's jump into the show now and let's jump straight into, we've actually got a pre-recording that we've done that we're going to include here about our Wagga Supercross wrap-up, and you're going to get to meet the AlwaysMoto Contractor. All right, something a little different on the AlwaysMoto podcast for this episode 39 of AlwaysMoto podcast. We're going to bring in the AlwaysMoto Contractor who's still waiting for his paycheck. It's Big Ben. How are we doing, Ben?
I'm good. How are you, Dave?
Not too bad, mate. We've got you on the payroll here at AlwaysMoto, but we're all still waiting for that paycheck. But you were actually at Wagga Supercross for round 4, for the final round for the Aussie Supercross, mate.
Yes, I was. Was there in the flesh, and it was a good day.
It looked pretty good. Like I only got to see it on the 7+, which I was actually impressed that the Wagga round made 7+. To be honest, I wasn't sure that was going to happen.
Well, I'd been looking to see if it was going to be on there, and I think they left it really late to post that it was going to be aired. But it's good to see that they did air it.
Yeah, I know that like the same sort of thing happened when they it was for Newcastle. It was sort of a late announcement too that was happening, and I wasn't sure that. I wonder if that's like a round by round thing, if they're judging how many people were actually downloading it, or if it was literally like just last minute contracts that they didn't have anything in place until the last second before it started, sort of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think with the first round being aired, along with World Supercross, I think the overseas people got to watch it as well, and then I think there was a lot of people saying, "Hey, where's round 2 in Adelaide?
Where's the rest of it?
Where's the rest of it?" So I think I'm guessing Seven put together the package and continued it on for Newcastle and Wagga.
Did you do like the rest of us did? There was that MX Store live feed from somebody just standing beside the track with their phone filming Adelaide. Did you watch that? Because I was watching that at some point, and then I was really pissed. It cut out like with maybe 3-4 laps to go on the 450 main event, and I was like, Jesus, can't even see the final finish of the race.
Yeah, no, I did watch it. I got the notification came up on my phone. I was like, "Oh, sweet, we've got some vision." But it thanks to them, MX Store, for doing it. But it's a lot better when it's on the TV.
Oh, much easier to follow too. When it's up a bit higher with the camera angle, the ground level phone wasn't fantastic to see anything.
No, that's right. And they're trying to film everything at once, and it's hard.
Doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work. But so Wagga, pretty much a day race, the whole thing, wasn't it? Because I gather they don't have the greatest lighting down there, but it ended up being all in the daylight. What do you think of it?
Yeah, so I think they turned the lights on. Probably must have been 6, maybe. I think they did it after the freestyle, the second part of the freestyle. I think they turned them on.
Did it make a difference at all? Like, it didn't look like it on the TV.
No, not. I think it was still too light to have made a difference. So I think that's the first Supercross I've been to that's actually been on in the daytime. The rest of them have all been at night.
Yep.
So yeah, it was a little bit different, but yeah, I don't think it was still too light for the actual stadium lights to do anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just I think they actually waited. They made them wait on the gate for I think it was probably race 2 for the 250s, and they said wait, like you can't go until we turn the lights on. But yeah, I don't think it really made much of a difference.
Yeah, I did notice that, and I thought that's what was going on. But yeah, it doesn't. There's always that funny window in Aussie summertime where like the sun's in the wrong angle, and it makes it impossible to see. And I don't know how those guys were coping on the track at Wagga. Like they just had some pretty steep jumps there and big rhythm sections, and you probably couldn't see half of it if you're facing the wrong way, straight into the sunlight.
Yeah, no, I think the rhythm section before the whoops there, it was in the pretty much in the shade, like in the dark, sort of in the afternoon, and then the corner had a little bit of sun on it, so they're going from the most of the track being in the sun to then into the shadows, and then back into the sun, and then you've got some shadows from because the jumps are so big in some spots, you've got shadows in those areas. Yeah, their line choice would have been compromised by what they could see and what they couldn't see.
Yeah, and at that point, they're probably just taking what they remembered from the from earlier in the day, and not being able to see if there was actually a better line to take, at some point.
Yeah, that's right. And I think either that or they're probably, just following the person in front till they just get that chance when when they're in the light. And but yeah, no, it would have been pretty sketchy, I think, with ruts and the shadows and everything. I wouldn't have liked to be riding on that, that's for sure.
Well, it got pretty dusty too. At one point on the coverage, they sort of had a bit of a long shot, and you've rewatched it too. You've probably seen it, but like the whole place looked like it just had a haze hanging over it with the dust. Like it was a pretty dry track there at the end.
Yeah, the dust hung around for ages. There wasn't much of a breeze, which made the heat even worse through the day. But yeah, the dust just hung around after pretty much the first sort of 450 race into the second one, for the 250s. That is when it sort of started to just hang around, which again is also when they turned the lights on. So um, yeah, they put plenty of water on it before the actual night show. Like they soaked the track, but with the heat, it just dried up so quick, and there's nothing they can really do about it.
They had similar problems at Newey. Did you hear about how long out from the actual event they started building the track? Did you hear anything about that? Because that's sort of what happened in Newcastle. They seem to have a short build time, so then obviously they didn't have it in the ground on the stadium floor for too long. So there was not enough time to just sort of put water in it over a couple of days. It was just here, quick rush. We're doing it this morning, and then we're riding on it tonight, sort of thing. Was it the same in Wagga? Do you know at all?
I think. See, they had an arena cross track there already that they brought in a heap of dirt
Oh,
to build up on, and so I think the works were going on all week. But I'm not actually sure when the Supercross track was, like, the full track was finished for them to actually start properly putting the
yeah,
water onto it. But yeah, so a lot of that dirt was already there and been sitting there for a long time.
yeah.
And then yeah, they've obviously added a heap of dirt to build up to the
Get a bit
the
bigger.
big Supercross track.
Yeah. Well, they did end up with a decent track lap time. They ended up being over a minute, which is pretty decent for an Aussie round.
And that's it's a decent lap time. And it was a massive track. Big jumps, and with the long lap time, it made for good viewing. I think it's different to, I think. Well, I don't know how long Newcastle was, but it was obviously a lot shorter.
Yeah, it was only in the
But
43s, I think it was, for the fast guys, seconds lap. So yeah, it's pretty quick lap time.
yeah, and I think with that too, like the start gate and going out and around and coming in was something different, which I also hadn't seen. So that going out that little bit further, back into a fast rhythm section, it gives you, a few more seconds there, and adding something different in that isn't normally on a track.
Yeah, well, it kind of, I don't know about you, but when I saw it, the first pictures of it, and then, seeing the jump sizes when I first saw the couple of laps that they did, it kind of reminded me of those Atlanta Speedway tracks from the AMA series last few years, actually. Where they're a bit bigger, a bit more spaced out. They seem to have, a bigger triple, not just that standard sort of 65, 70 foot, whatever it ends up being. It actually looked like they could just build bigger. They had the space, and it sort of worked out that way. Like, obviously, everything you're saying, track was just bigger, just bigger all around.
Yeah, no, I think they used, they definitely used their space, and the Atlanta, like the speedway jumps and that, are a lot bigger. And I think the triple there was probably the biggest I've seen on a track that, you know, was right in front of people, being able to, you'd actually have to look back, like pull your neck back and actually look up at them in the air.
Nice.
And even the finish line jump, like that was massive too. And they're barely even, they're barely even trying. It just pops them that easy, just because they're so high. So it was good to see because, they're normally just a simple triple or whatever. But yeah, no, they were big.
That's one thing too, actually. Just when you said that, it kind of reminded me of one of the first times I went to a Supercross as a kid, and it was a speedway track just like that, but at Parramatta. And you'd walk in, and because you're at ground level, and like nowadays in Supercrosses, like Marvel Stadium, or in the American ones, you're in a big stadium, so you're up in a stadium seat somewhere, usually level 1 or 2 sort of thing, and they're at eye level or below. But it's one that you walk in, and then they just the speedway track, your ground level, they hit that triple. You literally, like you said, you throw your head back to see where they went. You got to look up to them. It's crazy how high they actually get off those jumps.
Yeah, that's right. And they were to start with, they were over jumping it because they couldn't work it out. It took them a long time to get used to what they actually needed to get across it and land smoothly. There was a lot of a lot of over jumping. So I'd say there was plenty of sore wrists Saturday night after that race.
Yeah, I think that's just the Aussie guys learning tracks, because I seem to see the same thing at Newcastle. Just guys over jumping everything, trying to figure out their timing, and it's like they just didn't have enough time to slowly take a section at a time. They had to try and just hit them all in once, and they just kept stuffing stuff up all the time.
Yeah, I think though when you've got Josh Hill, who we all know what he's like when it comes to jumping, whatever bike he rides, it doesn't matter. He even overjumped a few times. So
okay.
I think when you're all on the same page as him, you probably don't feel too bad.
Yeah, he must be doing something right then, because he's pretty confident with those sorts of big jumps. He's confident with that stuff, easy as. So yeah.
Yeah.
And he pulled a couple of quads out too. The track at least had a couple of options. He managed to do that one after the finish line, and there was that odd rhythm he seemed to do odd because it was different to everybody else to start with, but he was doing that one on the back straight there as well. That the couple of Mossy and I think Brayton ended up doing it towards the end of the night. But yeah, he managed to find some big jumps out there.
Yeah, so that section over there, just before the whoops there, I think it was probably a few laps into practice, and he hit that. He, didn't muck around, and then I think in the heat race he must have done it again. And then when Mossy got the lead in the race one, he hit it just about every lap. I think just to try and keep away from I think it was Brayton who was second at that point. And yeah, just trying to get it, and Brayton wasn't hitting it. It was only probably 3 or 4 times I saw him, and I think that actually led to the flat tire that he got. So then I think for the rest of the night, that was it. He stayed away from it.
What's the go there? Like, I don't know about you, but I feel like there's been way too many flat tires in Supercross lately.
Yeah, well, you look at what in Melbourne, I think there was maybe 2 or 3 or something like that, and then Brayton's on. Well, in Newcastle, did he have a flat? Was it a flat?
No, that ended up not being a flat for that end of the night. That was some other bike engine issue that they didn't really sort of pass over too much information about. But yeah, like the Melbourne ones, I think were all to do with the metal ramp, but there was no metal ramps at Wagga, so it kind of a bit curious as to what's going on there. If they're just using cheaper thinner tubes, or if they're just getting a pinch flat somehow because of the casing and squashing the softer tire walls or something. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Brayton's was probably due to pinching a tube because he just hit that last. He just didn't quite get the quad right. But yeah, who knows if yeah, they're on the edge all the time, and you come up that little bit short, and that's it. Bang,
Got to be
you pinch the tube, and you're done.
Got to be pretty scary, but to be Brayton and then still have to do what he did, a lap and a half or 2 laps or something, wasn't it, with a flat tire? Like trying to ride
Yeah,
a
well,
bike on a Supercross track with a flat tire can't be a good idea.
no, and you could tell the difference between Newcastle uh, and Wagga with when he slowed down. Now that you say that it was more a motor thing or whatever it was, he was still jumping some things, not going like doing the triple or anything like that, but the little doubles and stuff like that, he was still hitting them. But yeah, it slows you down dramatically, and when you can't hit the big things, and it could have nearly cost him. Like it was only 1 point in the end, and
Got tight,
that could have cost him.
Yeah, it got really tight there. I don't think Mossy really realised how close he got to that until they, showed him the points when they're sitting there at the end. But yeah, he almost got another Australian title there. He's maybe a lap or so away from that if it had been a bit longer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if he'd gone back any further, even just one position, that it would have been the title would have gone to Mossy. So, yeah, disappointing for us that he didn't get it, but for Brayton to go 5 in a row, that's pretty special.
Still pretty impressive, eh? And like 5 in a row, but it's like with 2-3 year gap in the middle from the COVID losses. But yeah, it's still pretty impressive for Brayton.
Yeah, and then the last two, it's 1 point with Mossy, and I'm not sure how many points ended up between him and Luke Clout in 2019, but Luke Clout was leading going into that Ausex Open.
Yep.
And just had a horrible night. I think he got taken out on a few of the starts because it was a Triple Crown format, and no fault of his own. But you say the last two that he's got were both right to the end, but he's walked away with them.
Yeah, and I think you got yourself in a little bit of strife there, didn't you? You got a message back from your Eve about saying Brayton wasn't maybe coming back next year. Saw that on Twitter. Twitter's great for a bit of banter at times, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I just said, if it was me, he's, especially with the flats and the motors, and there's a few riders this week over in the US that have been pretty unlucky with engine problem or bike problems, but he's the last two have come pretty close, and you're at 5 in a row now. I just said, I think that he might just say, no, like that's it, I'm done. I'm happy with what I've done. And Uribe had a little dig at me, although he did say, he's like, no disrespect, but
pointed out the facts, you reckon?
Pointed out the facts in 2019. Brayton had broken ribs and whatever else, and that's all true. I said to Uribe, I said that's fine. I said that's all true. But there was no intent for me saying Brayton's rubbish, he's not coming back. It was just if that was me, I'd be happy and I'd leave it at that. And
you got to look at the other side of it too, but like Brayton did retire from official AMA racing this year. Like he's got to be getting close to just hanging it up altogether. So yeah, you would think that's like your comment. I would have said similar. That he's getting older. He's had a few close calls on these things. Why risk it? But maybe he does. You just have to wait and see, don't you? So it's
yeah, that's right. It's just one of those things, but. Like I said, there was no disrespect to from Uribe or to Brayton. It's all just a bit of banter, and he said, Brayton loves Australia, and everyone really welcomes him when he comes here, which is what we need, because these American riders, if they don't get that, they're going to go, well, there might be money there, but why bother going all the way over if the fans don't want to interact with us. So
Yeah.
it's we need it.
We definitely do. It makes our series a bit more legitimate too when you have a guy like Brayton in the field. Gives some credibility to the Aussie guys like Clout, like Tanny. Those rides are looking pretty impressive now, aren't they? That they've got results against those sorts of guys. So yeah, it gives us legitimate. We need him. Maybe not. Maybe if he does retire, but we need somebody like him to keep coming back. And Dean Wilson's probably going to be like that next year when he's here full time for the Aussie series for the Supercross at least. So that'll be pretty cool to have him here. Hopefully it all works out and he does make it here. But yeah, it's a long way off yet.
Yeah, no, and he's a character in himself, So that's for him to come out and race the series. It's like you said, we need someone or even a few. I probably would have liked to seen Anstie in the 450 class more than the 250 class, but the more riders we can get out, and the more sort of, I'm sure there's kids that don't even know who these people are. Their parents just see that, oh, there's a race on this weekend. We might go
Yeah.
have a family outing. They don't know who these people are. And you rock up and you see Dean Wilson and you're like, oh, man, I'm going to follow this guy. Like, he's a laugh.
Yeah.
He has fun, straight to the socials, give him a follow. And, that might be your favourite rider or the kid's favourite rider for the next few years until he hangs up the boots.
Yeah.
It's the only way that the sport's going to grow.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on something interesting there about Anstie. Like, he was super fast in that 250 class, but yeah, it's kind of interesting that he was there in that class and not in the 450s.
Yeah, and then to switch back to what he said is he's going to be on the West Coast next year, or come January
Yeah,
5th or 6th, whatever the date is. I'm interested in that move, but
all those rule changes too for I don't know if you've seen that, but it only came out today. I think it was that they were announcing the rule changes for who points out of 250 AMA stuff. So it sort of opened that gate up a bit more for a few more of the older guys to still ride 250 class. It looks like Max is going to be one of those guys. It'll be interesting to see if he gets any decent results out of it.
Yeah, they can just ride it now pretty much as long as they want. So for him, I'm not sure who's, we don't know yet who's riding east or west, but I would expect him to be
He'd be close,
at the
wouldn't he?
top. But
Yeah,
I mean,
should be close.
if he goes against Jet, I'd like to see that.
I don't think he's going to be up at Jet's pace. Like, let's be honest. Like, there's a fair bit of difference there, I would think, on a Supercross track at this point.
Yeah, no, there'll be a bit of a difference, but like I'd love to see how he goes against him.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, the 250 riders over there are elite athletes, and you're over there, you're racing with the best of the best. You just got to see how you go.
Yeah, but he did have a decent crash in that in both races, wasn't it? I think he had the heat race there. He had to try to jump that quad that we're talking about that Hill was doing near the finish line, and managed to run into the back of the guy who was in the front leading the race, and then he had another crash in, I think it was off the start, wasn't it, for the final race on for the 250 class, and had to work his way through the field. But he killed that first main event. He got a decent start and just disappeared.
Yeah, no, I think it might have been Nathan Crawford he hit the back of and went over the side of the berm there. But that's another thing. If you just a simple little crash like that and you break a wrist or something,
yes,
that's
championship gone with
it.
one race to go.
Yeah, championship gone, and what can you do? But I can't actually remember whether there was one in the second heat or not, but in the second race. But yeah, he didn't get a very good start. But yeah, he got all the way back up, which you expect him to do, but they weren't making it easy for him.
No, but I think at that point in that last race, he knew that he had the championship. Just ride out. He gets his money, as he said to me the other night. Just shaking your reeve down for more money, which I thought was hilarious. But he's obviously had a good couple of weeks here in Australia as to money wise for him, so that's good.
Yeah, no, well, he finished fourth in that last the final two. So, with the bad start, didn't help. But yeah, no, I think he's gotten everything he can out of Uribe, that's for sure.
Pretty much, I don't think there's much left in that piggy bank from Uribe for the SX2 class on Ansie's list there. So yeah, all good. So a couple of other things we're going to touch on before we go. Obviously, Brayton won the championship. Mossy won the round. Tanny managed to get back from that concussion in Newcastle and still have a pretty good result there. Won that last race, and I think it was third or fourth, wasn't it, that he was in that first one. So he's pretty damn close to the pretty good night, and really a pretty good year for Tanny all around, winning the Australian Outdoors and pretty close to that Supercross championship as well.
And yeah, he was close. I think he was a bit unlucky to go over the handlebars and get that concussion in Newcastle.
Did he look all right in the morning, like in the practice and stuff? Because I always wonder that first ride back, is there that timidness after a concussion, or is everything working and functioning, or you got to sort of build back into it? Did he look all right first out in the track?
Yeah, so they came out and they rolled the track. They did, they do a sighting lap, and then they were into it, and he looked like he was taking his time. But when I went into the pits later, I went up and I saw him, and I said, how are you feeling after last week? And he goes, he said, I'm bummed, but he was in Wagga, he could race. He couldn't ask, I suppose, for a better outcome after that crash.
Yeah, in fact, he was there to
but
race.
He said he was probably only, and he'd only got cleared the night before. So, but he said to me, I'm only probably racing at about, I only feel about 80%. So if 80%'s going out and winning the final race, then that's pretty good. And he was 8 seconds ahead of Moss. So yeah, if 80% gives you that, then we've seen what 100% can do. So he's just really unlucky in Newcastle.
Exactly. I said it a few times on Twitter the last few weeks when he's been out doing something, crazy out the front. He hasn't really got results before in Supercross. I don't think he's had too many races for Aussie stuff at least. And I really feel like somebody should be giving him a ride for a West Coast or something like that, for a couple of rounds. I think he'd surprise a lot of people over there, eh?
Well, I think he did have one a few years ago, and it never came to. I'm not sure who with, but I'm sure I heard that he did have a ride signed, and it just never eventuated.
You've reminded me. I think he was going to do one right before the COVID stuff started, and then he didn't go, wasn't it? Because he didn't want to risk the getting in and out of the country and all that sort of business. I'm pretty sure he was one. There was maybe another one as well at that point. Was it Jay Wilson or something as well?
Yeah, we had Luke Clout, Jay Wilson, and there was one more person that was over there. All three of them were over there at one time.
Yeah.
But because I remember Luke Clout taking out Justin Cooper on one of the berms in one of the
making
races.
A statement, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he did pretty well in that heat race too. But yeah, I can't remember who the other person was, but there was definitely those two over there.
I think now, but obviously he's made a pretty good statement this year, and that World Supercross round, in Melbourne where he got on the podium. I think if he got a couple of decent go at the AMA stuff, I think people would be trying to keep him around there. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he could get over there. I don't know what his plans are. I didn't get to ask him that when I saw him in Newcastle. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if that comes off at all.
Yeah, well, I think the World Supercross definitely would have opened the eyes of a lot of people for him.
Yeah.
Because in Melbourne, he killed it in Melbourne, and that was in front of the world stage. So, I'd maybe next year, depending on how the next year goes, or whether there happens to be a fill-in ride, maybe pop up for East Coast or something like that. He might get lucky, but yeah, I think he definitely deserves it. If it comes calling, he definitely deserves it after the year he's had.
Yeah, definitely. And then obviously there was a pretty big injury in the SX3 class that sort of stopped and red flagged one of the races. We've been able to check in with the WBR Yamaha team there on Cole Davies this week. You said you saw it, but We've checked in on the team, and he's actually doing okay. He's been released and all that sort of stuff. So he's on the mend, which is great to hear. But you said it looked pretty ugly, pretty live by the side of the track there for you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a very nice crash. You can, if you were watching on the coverage, you can sort of see the first part of it. But he went over the bars and landed on the top of the next jump, and just the way he landed, and he didn't move, and you just sit there going, "Oh, please be all right," Don't have, nothing major, but um, I will give props to the Wagga Motorcycle Club too, because their flag is not just for that, not for the accident, but all night. If there was a yellow flag, the Red Cross flag, or even the blue flag, they were on the ball all night. I know flaggers get a lot of cop, normally they cop a lot of hate and stuff like that, but
Mm.
yeah, they were on the ball, so I'll give that to them. But yeah, no, they made sure that he was right, and they got him onto the whatever you call it.
Like a mule
Is
or
it
whatever.
Asterix or
Yeah.
whatever it is? Yeah, the mule,
Yeah.
and they
Oh, for
took him
race
over to
safe.
the
Yeah.
the race safe mule. That's it, not Asterix. Yeah, race safe mule, and yeah, took him over to the truck that they've got there, and I think they took him to the hospital for the extra
Yeah.
precautions. But yeah, as you said, he's all it was a concussion. So yeah, he's a very lucky boy.
Yeah, no, you got out of that one pretty good by the sounds of it, considering it was just like we say, just a concussion, but concussion's pretty serious. But at least there wasn't anything broken to go along with that. It just needs a week or two, and he should be right as rain, which is awesome to hear. And the few people that reached out to see if I knew what was going on, appreciate your contacts. And yeah, look, we passed that information along to those people already. So yeah, anybody else listening, at least know he's doing all good. And then
Yeah.
yeah, so I think there was only one other thing we had listed down here that we're talking about, and it was kind of more of a funny story than anything. But you got to meet Haruki Yokoyama in the pits at one point.
Yeah, so I went over to him in the pits too, and I had a chat with him, and I said, how's the track and how's the whoops, and what he thought of the heat and everything, and he said it's hot and it's very hard, especially the whoops. They're pretty hard, but he was actually standing on a stand to be able to be higher than the banner that goes around the front of the truck, so he could sign the posters for the kids and talk to the people. So he's really quick on the track, but just that the shortness just hurts him in the whoops. Like he'd lose time in the whoops, and then he'd catch it all back up on the track. But yeah, he's a short person, that's for sure.
He's not very high, unfortunately. His legs are probably about an inch long. So that's not really joking. He's very short bloke, but he's super fast on the rest of the track. Like he's really good. Obviously, he's lightweight, so he gets a really good start. But he can corner really well. He does the rhythms pretty good. But yeah, the whoops, he's so short that as soon as he gets a bump in the back, it obviously the seat's going to hit him in the butt, and that just kicks his feet off a lot of the time. And watching him in Newcastle was a bit dangerous to watch, because you just weren't sure if he was going to make the corner or not, because his feet weren't on the pegs most of the time by halfway through the whoop section. I'm sure it was the same in Wollongong, in Wagga, sorry. But yeah, it probably wasn't much different there.
No, and the whoops weren't that great. In practice and qualifying, everyone was sort of really struggling to get through them. Even the 450 guys, and between that and the night show, I think they took the top off them a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you looked at them from side on, they looked like a big pillow. And they were really deep in between each one. And so yeah, they were, it wasn't just him, but yeah, they were all struggling to get through. Um, but yeah, by the end of the night, I think everyone sort of had them under control. But I talked to Dylan Wills too in the pits, and he said that they were, after qualifying and that they weren't really cupping out. They were just having holes everywhere and really hard edges that had popped the back up. And so there's a few people that, did that, drop down into the next one and then over the bars. yeah, they were definitely one of the talking points for the riders while we were walking around in the pits.
Yeah, I think that goes to that whole thing we were talking about just a bit earlier about the track being just bigger. They didn't hold back on those from what I could see in Wagga for the whoops. They were a long set and a pretty decent size set. So yeah, they didn't hold back.
No, they didn't. And but bigger track, bigger whoops. That's just how it is.
Yeah, definitely. Did you get to see much of the actual dirt up close? Like, were you able to get out on the track at the end of the night or anything like that?
No, they didn't let us. There was a track walk, but I wasn't part of it.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it just looked really hard and slippery from where I
yeah,
was. And it goes like that bluey color.
yeah. Gets the blue groove on top because the tire wears off on
Y-
it all, shines up.
Yeah, yeah, and it had that in some spots. Um, but yeah, no, it wasn't. They had to do a lot of work between obviously quali and that once they'd watered it down. But yeah, it's still by the end of the night it had that blue groove and
Mm.
it was just hard and dusty.
It's disappointing. I was hoping you might have been able to get on at the end of the night there. It's actually quite surprising. The couple of like I got to go on the Melbourne track, in Marble Stadium there, and onto the Newcastle track for track walk during the day while I was still watering and stuff. It's actually quite surprising. Like when you watch these things on TV, the tracks look, the dirt looks really good usually because it's all prepped up and it's smoothed out. When you actually look at the dirt, the amount of shit that's in it is ridiculous. Like it's obviously just off job sites and stuff that they've got locally to build the track and get it cheap and all that sort of stuff. So there is just random crap in the dirt at times, and it's not as fantastic as you think it would be up close. So yeah, it's one you'll have to check out at some point. We'll have to get you on a track walk soon here.
Yeah, we'll get on there one day. But I think like the Melbourne dirt, it had been sifted or whatever they do to try and get all the rubbish out of it. And I
Yeah.
think I heard that there was nails
Oh,
in it,
yeah,
even
yeah.
though it had already been done. So
When I
it
walked around the end
it
of the
doesn't
night,
surprise me.
yeah, when I walked at the end of the night, man, that you could spot the stuff. You're just walking along, you're like, oh, look at that. Oh, yeah, look at that. There's a tech screw, and there's a nail, and there's a bit of plastic bottle cap, and just like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not as good as you think. Like I said, when you get up close and look at it, you're probably better off looking at it from the camera or from the stands. It's
Yeah.
like a chick. You get up close, and you're like, ooh, I should have just kept going back to the end of the field and checked you out.
Yeah, that's right. I would have liked to have seen Joseph Allen taste the dirt from Wagga. That would have been good because
He did that on TV, didn't he? Jeez, he gets into his job there. Joseph does, yeah.
yeah, well, he did it in Atlanta. I think it was. I don't know if it was this year or last year, and then yeah, decided, oh, we'll just do it. We'll do it in Melbourne too. But
Mm,
yeah, he's a
yeah,
character, that guy.
not advisable on eating
Actually,
dirt.
yeah. Um, Another thing on Anstie, I when we were in the pits, he was outside the Honda tent, and he was doing an interview with Lee Hogan, which you would have seen on
Oh
the
yeah, yep,
coverage.
yep.
And he's from England. He's pasty white. Would hate the heat.
He would have been
And
burning up out there, wouldn't he?
yeah, he was standing there in his slides, and he's talking to Lee Hogan and whatever. And I was right next to it, and just watching. And the interview finishes, and he goes, "Oh, he's like, I'm going to get in the shade. I'm burning here." He said, "I'm going to be orange by the time I get out at Wagga this weekend."
Good old pommy skin. It's not good for much
Yeah.
else but burning and going bright red. Yep.
Yeah, no, he said, "I'm just going to burn." So
Yeah, the joys of Supercross in the Aussie summer. Yep, that's what they miss out on in America. But it's always they're always in the winter time over there. So yeah, we got you back, man.
yeah, I'm back.
All good. I'll chop that bit out, but we'll keep going. I was just saying. So yeah, so Max Dancey's he's burning himself up there. But no, I'm not surprised. He'd probably need to stay in the under the awning there all weekend.
Yeah, no, well, he and Brayton and all the other riders were all trying to keep cool. And I actually I talked to Nathan Crawford too, and under their tent was probably the coolest one. There was a breeze blowing out, they had the fans going and everything like that. So all measures were being taken to keep the riders cool. because I think it ended up being 34 or 35.
Pretty,
So when the boys were doing qualifying, that's, that heat's crazy.
yeah, on a Supercross track, that's pretty hard. You're not getting away from that too quickly. It's not like you're getting up to top speed and cooling down with the breeze as you go through. So yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah, that's right.
All good. All right, man. Well, look,
Now
I think.
we might have people listening at home and shaking their heads, but Tanti did actually do East Coast in America.
He's looking up while he's on the job here, mate. Yeah, good work. All right, so he's done some.
Yeah, so I think the Serco Yamaha gave him a ride, and he went over there and did 6 rounds. So, and he made 5 of the 6. So yeah, he did do it. So sorry to those people that I said that I don't think it happened, but it did. So he was the third rider. It was him, Jay Wilson, and Luke Clout.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that makes all sense. But yeah, he's obviously had a better year this year, and I think if he went back again, I wouldn't be surprised if he made every main and even some top tens there, and that would just really turn some heads. I think he needs to do that if he's got any option to do it. Yeah, it would be good to take it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's worked for it, and yeah, he should be able to go for it.
Yeah, definitely. All good. I appreciate you finding that out before we cut off there. That was awesome. All right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, look, let's wrap this section of the show up, and we'll have to get you. We'll give a little tease here for everybody with the AMA starting up in January. Obviously, we're going to run the AlwaysMoto Fantasy League again. We're going to have the AlwaysMoto Contractor coming on probably for most of these shows now to talk through some fantasy stuff and help build that section of the league up. So we'll hear a bit more from Ben in the coming episodes.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. It's going to be a big season, especially with Ken Roxton this morning, or so it was this morning our time, but over in America finally deciding which colour of the rainbow he wanted to ride on. So yeah, no, it's going to be a good season for fantasy. As much as I hate it, I love it. But
love-hate relationship,
yeah,
man. Love-hate relationship.
Yeah, that's right. And, we're not counting down the days till Christmas. We're counting down the days till Supercross. So
exactly. That's the post I put up today, and it's got a fair bit of response, to be honest. So, no, it's definitely hanging for Supercross. Can't wait.
Yeah. But, yes, it's a love-hate relationship fantasy. But, the guys at Pulpamex who have built it and made it what it is for us to all enjoy, it's it's really good.
Yeah, definitely. So, look, for those listening that aren't part of the league, if you jump on that Pulp MX website there for the Fantasy League, for the Fantasy, and then check out the leagues and search AlwaysMoto, you'll find us there, and you just need the password injury, so INJURY, in lowercase, and that will get you into the AlwaysMoto Fantasy League, and then we're going to have some prizes. We don't have them all confirmed just yet, but it'll be similar to last year. We're going to have Coastal Motorcycles with some vouchers. We're probably going to have Goat Brand with some knee brace socks. And we're just trying to confirm a couple other things that will be a bit different from last year. That might be some goggles and maybe some tubes, but we'll announce that stuff a little bit later on, probably the show before the season kicks off. So, yeah, jump in, join the league, and yeah, we'll hear more from Ben over the 2023 season here on the AlwaysMoto podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be a good season, but yeah, thanks for bringing me on board to do that.
No, all good, man. All right, we'll take a quick break here.
Hi there, my name is Eldon Baker, and I'm from the Baker's Factory, and you're listening to AlwaysMoto.
All right, guys and girls, we're back. Let's jump into the emergency department now. The emergency department. All the injuries, all the gory details, and when they'll be back on track. It's the list you really don't want to be on. It definitely is not the list you want to join, unfortunately, but lots of guys are joining it and not on their free will, probably. Unfortunately, another big crash was seen in the Supercross there at that final round at Wagga. We had a few people reaching out to us to see if we had any information on that, and we have got back to those guys direct. But we did provide a little update on that earlier there in that chat with the AlwaysMoto Contractor, Big Ben. Cole Davies in that SX3 class had a big one, was seen on the track, for quite a while there, not moving, red flag and all that sort of jazz. And yeah, obviously it concerned a few of the spectators out there because a few of you have reached out to me. I managed to catch up with the WBR Yamaha team shortly afterwards. I think that was on Sunday or Monday. I can't recall which day it was there that we actually chatted. No, it was definitely Monday. And they were kind enough to let us know that Cole is actually doing quite well. They saw him in the hospital that night, but he was already up talking. Remembered the accident even, which is impressive. So he's obviously got a different type of concussion. There's obviously different grades and different parts that you lose depending on which part of the head you knock. So he obviously could remember it, was talking, was hungry, all that sort of stuff. So that was all good signs, and he was going to be released shortly after. So he was on the mend pretty quickly there, and they even said that he was going to be flying back to his homeland in New Zealand. Probably by the time you hear this, he should be sitting at home on the couch, probably having a rest up. So that's really good to hear from Cole, and yeah, just nice to be able to provide some positive information there, and obviously, having you guys check in, concerned, it's nice to be able to fill you guys in as well. So please, I really like that you guys are reaching out to us here as the the injury experts in the field. So please continue to do so. We'll try and provide that information wherever we can, but always just keep the ears on the AlwaysMoto podcast and be able to fill you guys in with that stuff. That was the main sort of injury that came out of the round that we've been able to see so far. We've checked in with a few people just to see where they were up to. We had some messages with Hicks and McInnes, who we spoke about on the last show, having some issues at Newcastle. Said he was going to ride Wagga, and then sort of did, but sort of didn't. And I sort of checked in with him to make sure that he was all good. And it was actually a bike issue that kept him out of the second part of the night there. So that was good to know. Good in a way. It wasn't a physical injury. Bike can obviously be repaired a bit easier than a body. So it was nice to know that it wasn't any issues lingering from Newcastle that kept him out there. Which was good. We also checked in with Tristan Duncan because he had a DNF there as well in the night show, but he's told us that he's all good as well, no injury from himself. So that was nice to hear as well. And just an update on a couple of other things. So obviously we had the big injury lists there throughout the series for the Australian Supercross, which you can hear that list a bit more on our other shows. But we had a check in with Ryan Kohlenberg. He was the one who's had a broken heel in Newcastle. He's since had surgery, and he sent me through the images of his x-ray this week. We're just having a bit of a chat about things, and he's got a lot of metal popped into that heel of his, and it's not going to be a fun 8 to 12 weeks for him whilst he's in a boot. I think he said he's in a half cast at the moment. That'll probably change to a strap-on, strap-off moon boot style that a lot of you out there would be familiar with. And he's going to be non-weight bearing for about 8 to 12 weeks because the heels are just... We said this on the previous show, but heels are notoriously bad at healing, pun intended. And yeah, so look, he's going to have a rough few weeks here ahead of him, but hopefully he will be all good, ready to go. We've seen that AusPro Motocross Series announcement for the calendar coming out the other day, so it's going to be early March that's kicking off. So a lot of these guys are going to be focusing on that as their recovery point. So they've got about... Well, we're probably just under 3 months to get ready for a lot of these guys, which should be plenty of time for them to be back fit and healthy by that point. So, yeah, like we said, a big list this year in the Australian Supercross of injuries for 4 rounds. It was a rough couple of rounds there for a lot of these guys, but hopefully this will be a bit of a, baptism by fire. It's been 3 years since we've had a Supercross series. A lot of them now will know what to expect for next year, and hopefully they'll be a lot more prepared, have a bit better practice, probably have better home practice tracks built so they can practice more of these obstacles in a bit more of a race simulation, like race track style, not just a little home background track there. So hopefully we see less injuries in 2023, but hopefully we just see the series back as a regular fixture with more events, more popularity, all those sorts of good things to keep this series on the road and going strong. Let's switch gears a little bit and go to the AMA list, which we are mostly known for here. But obviously, we've been covering World Supercross and Australian Supercross lately because it's off season for the AMA stuff, which it's now obviously following our chat with Alden Baker on a couple of episodes ago. So go and check that out if you haven't heard it already. But we were chatting to Alden there about the preseason kicking off at the beginning of November. Well, it's been a couple of weeks into the preseason training for a lot of these guys now, and unfortunately, we've got a few people joining the injured list already, which is not a great thing. You would have seen a few of these going around on Instagram and social media there. So we've had Carson Mumford from that Bar X Suzuki team. Unfortunately, he's got a wrist fracture, which was pretty significant. He had a nice big step in that arm, and he's had surgery on that already. So we're going to try and check in with him next week and try and get him on the next episode of the podcast. Justin Rodbell as well, unfortunately, is on that injured list, and he's likely out for all of Supercross at this stage. He has an Achilles rupture. Again, we're talking with Justin. Hopefully we'll get him on the podcast in the coming episodes as well. The big ones and the scary ones that are on this list already, unfortunately, Brandon Hartraft, multiple injuries. And I'll just get Brandon's list up correctly here so we make sure we say all the right details. But he hasn't had a good time. It actually, some of the images of him on his social page kind of remind me of my own accident back in July. A bit of a similar scenario here. Not all the same injuries, but kind of similar sort of list here. So reading out from him, he had an L1, L2 end plate fracture, L3, L4 transverse process fracture, L1 and 1 to 3 spinous process fracture, left hip dislocation, right rib fractures on the rib 5 and 7, right scapular fracture, right hemothorax, which is a lung collapse with a chest tube placement. Now, like I said, similar to myself, I had a broken scapula, I had a broken collarbone, had 2 broken ribs, broken hip, had a T8, which is your thoracic vertebrae, a disc issue, and we were scanning for fractures there, which I'm still not convinced. I've got a couple of images that show there was a fracture, but then nobody actually listed it anyway. But yeah, so and like the chest tube bit, like I had the pulmonary embolism. I ended up with pneumonia. So yeah, it's all kind of similar scenario. Obviously, Brandon's back injuries are a lot more in depth there than I had, but yeah, just the whole pictures the way he's on the bed and getting transported in the jets to rehab and stuff. I had similar sort of things out of single flight from Mildura to Melbourne. So yeah, brought back some memories. But yeah, look, Brandon's not doing fantastic. There is road to recovery for him as well. Are looking after trying to look after the medical. So if anyone out there can donate, please jump over onto the Road to Recovery Instagram, and you'll find the links to donate to all the injured riders, but particularly Brandon in this instance. Now, just wanted to quickly touch on, and this comes up with the next injury on this list as well. So we got Kyle Greason, privateer, who is also got a back injury. He has a burst fracture of an L3 vertebrae. So I wanted to touch on, while we're here with all these lumbar, vertebral fractures, what's the difference for all of these ones, and kind of a little bit of what they mean. So if we go firstly through Brandon's ones and go the end plate fractures, now that means that the piece of bone, so if anyone knows or even want to look up while we're talking about this on Google, if you just search of lumbar vertebrae and get an image up, you'll get this little block, you'll get the opening of the canal at the back where the spinal cord goes through, and you'll have these little spikes that stick off in different directions. And one, if you run your finger up your back, you'll feel all the bumps as you go up your spine. That's the spinous process. The ones that you won't feel that stick sideways into your back, which is where all your muscles will attach for different movements from your back, they're the transverse processes. So the end plate is actually part of the block part of the vertebral body. It's the bottom section or the top section that touches the actual disc that goes into that next space before the next vertebrae. So when you break the end plate off, it's a serious injury. It's to the body of the vertebrae, and that can shift as well depending on if it's a displaced or undisplaced. Undisplaced meaning it's still right next to where it should be. It's just detached from the main part. Displaced means it's moved away from the main body of the vertebrae and potentially is going elsewhere. And they're the displaced ones are the ones that are concerning when we're talking spinal cords, because they can end up in the spinal cord, impacting it, severing it, all those really nasty things that we don't like to talk about. So that one's a difficult one to deal with, and that will require usually surgery. And when we talk surgery for stabilizing a vertebral fracture, we're talking generally about fusions where they screw the bone back together, yes, but then they screw that vertebrae to the level above and below the vertebrae above and below the injured one as a stabilizing mechanism. So you then lose some range of motion in your spine in that area because you've obviously made 3 vertebrae into one. You made it a big block rather than all being individual segments that move independently. So yeah, so for the end plate fracture, that's required the same thing. For the burst fracture, it's similar. They have to do the same sort of surgery. They will stabilize that vertebrae together. They'll screw it back together itself, but then they'll stabilize it above and below as a fusion to make it stable. Now, the burst fracture itself is different. It's the vertebral body again, but it can be right through the body. And when it says burst, it usually means that there's multiple pieces of that body of the vertebrae that are broken into it. It's not just in, say, 2 pieces. It's in 3 or 4 pieces, which makes it more difficult. And also more difficult, again, for the spinal cord injuries themselves because there's more multiple pieces going around. They usually go in different directions. And, yeah, it can be quite difficult. It sounds like both Kyle and Brandon at this stage might have had minor bits and pieces with sensation issues along the injury because that's what happens when inflammation all kicks in. But they've all got videos so far that I've seen of them up and about, obviously not moving like they normally would. They're being assisted around, but they're using all those normal functions, which is fantastic. They are both going to have a decent recovery time. I wouldn't put a timetable on it, but we're going to be talking sort of that 5 months, 6 months, thereabouts for this to sort of all come back around to a point where they're getting comfortable again, strengthened back again. But it's all a matter of time. Everybody's injury is different, right? You can't compare anybody to anybody else. Even if the injury is technically the same, they're all slightly different and everybody has different experiences, different past histories. So when anybody starts comparing, I had that back injury as well and I had this length of time recovery, you'll be fine. It's unfortunately a load of bullshit. And you can't compare it because there is no such thing as apples to apples in an injury sense. They are not the same people to people. Everybody is unique and every injury is unique, and that scenario does not carry over from one person to another to tell you that injury will be the same time frame. They may end up being similar time frames, but you won't have the same recovery path and you won't have the same recovery outcome. Everybody will be different. So don't compare anybody. That's my message, right? So those couple of different fractures. Now, the transverse process and the spinous process, they're the spiky bits at the back. If you're looking at that Google image like we told you to before, the one that you can feel out your back is a spinous process. They're a bit more of a minor vertebral fracture injury because they're not going to impact anything to do with the cord. They're still significant. It's still a fracture, but it's nothing like the burst or the end plate fracture. Or even a wedge fracture of the vertebral body as well. Those are more serious as well. So spinous process is okay, minor but okay. It will recover in that sort of 4 to 6 weeks. Same with the transverse process fracture. It'll be 4 to 6 weeks where they will heal. The issue for Brandon in particular, and similar like I had myself with these multiple fractures throughout your body, each individual one will take that 4 to 6 weeks if it was in isolation. But when you have multiple fractures around your body from the one incident, it takes longer because your body's got to repair multiple sites at once. So we start talking more 8 to 12 weeks for those fractures to be fully healed because the body's got to work even harder to repair everything else that's going on as well. There's only so much blood to go around, essentially. So it's going to take a little bit longer. But ideally, those transverse and spinous process fractures, if there was only 1 or 2 of those in one area, they'd only be a 4 to 6 week recovery time frame. So something to consider there. But that's just a little bit more information for you guys and girls out there listening to the show to help understand what type of fractures these guys have. And like I said, to not compare them to other people's fractures because they won't be the same scenarios. You can have the similar sort of things. Everybody will say, I've got a broken vertebra. But there's about 20 or more different ways you can break that vertebra, and they all mean 20 different things, and they'll have 20 different recovery timeframes. So just some more information there for you guys and girls. All right, also on the list, so far we've had Carson Mumford, Justin Rodbell, Brandon Hartraft, Kyle Greasom. Unfortunately, we've also heard about Garrett Marchbanks from Club MX having a wrist fracture. We haven't got too many details on there, but we're trying to find out some more on him. He's been identified as maybe moving to the East Coast for the Lights Supercross, which would give him a bit of time to be ready, but it'll be probably touch and go as to how much bike time he gets there before that actually happens. So again, so long as his injury recovery process actually takes the normal time frame, but he should be fine by that point. And another one to join that list with a similar sort of thing, another wrist fracture, is Noah Viney, who was going to make his debut this year in AMA Supercross. He has also had surgery on that wrist, and if you check out his social medias, we've been in touch with him. He is doing okay, but yeah, obviously disappointed that he's going to miss out. He was planning to do West, I believe, so he might be back later on, see what his team wants to do. He might do East Coast. He might just skip Supercross this year. We'll have to wait and see. He might just do the outdoors, but yeah. Unfortunately, we've already got, 6 guys on the list for 2023 injuries. So 6 preseason injuries so far, and we still have about a month to go until Supercross kicks off. So there's still a month worth of injuries still to be heard yet, unfortunately. And that would sort of fit with that sort of 10 to 20 range of injuries before the season kicks off that we had in the last year. The year before we didn't have so many, but yeah, last year we definitely had about this amount, which was about the normal preseason time period, whereas in the past few years before that we had some issues obviously with COVID and seasons and whatnot finishing at different points than normal. But yeah, so this is sort of fitting into that normal pattern, unfortunately. But those are the guys on the list for the AMA. We'll be keeping a bit more eye on that now, obviously with the Australian Supercross and World Supercross all finished up, but that's where that's up to for this stage. So that's the emergency department for episode 39 of the Always Moto podcast. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back with Dave's diatribe.
Hey, this is Brett Metcalf. You're listening to Always Moto podcast.
Righto, guys and girls, we're back. Let's get into Dave's diatribe. This is Dave's diatribe. What's a diatribe? Diatribe is a forceful and bitter attack against someone or something. So keep your head down. You might be next. That's right, you could be next. I love doing that part. We could be next. You never know who we're going to go after. But I thought we'd drop into something a bit comical, a bit, I'm going to do it over you, tit for tat sort of thing. That's what's come out today even. I think we just come out this morning since we've done this recording. Is the World Supercross announcement for the 2023 series that they've now got 6 rounds for, which is fantastic. I'm glad they've increased it. I thought they were going to have maybe 8 or 9 or 10. They've come out with 6, and again, please note, this is a provisional calendar. It even says provisional on their announcement here on their own website. Where does it say it? It was when you clicked on it there we go. World Championship provisional calendar announced 8th of December. Now, I'm glad it's out. It's awesome. But the diatribe part of this is that why the F do we have to have these rounds on the same rounds as the AMA? If you only got 6 of them, why can't we find the off weekends and make it so these guys could potentially do both? Now, I know that's comical because there's no way in the world that the AMA is going to allow the guys to do both of these rounds. That's why they sort of made the changes in terms of the prize money increases that they had, the extra rounds for their Super Motocross that they've now got. It's all sort of based on this World Supercross coming about, which, kind of pisses me off that you want to be able to have these guys accessible to both. And it's kind of difficult as to where they've now done this calendar. And this World Supercross calendar is quite stretched out. And I'm wondering if there's going to be more things put in or even potentially things disappearing if they can't quite confirm the last details of the contract or something along the way. They obviously needed to get this out so that teams can start preparing and start being ready and having riders signed properly and deals all in place and better sponsorships and all that sort of stuff. So they've obviously done the right part there by getting it out. But this calendar, which I'll read out to you guys now, is just a bit frustrating, and I'll show you why as we go along. So the first round for the World Supercross is going to be the 1st of July the British GP. The second round is going to be on the 22nd of July as the French GP. Third round is going to be in the 30th of September, which is the Asian GP. Then we're going to go to Germany on the 14th of October. And then it will be the 28th of October for the Canadian GP. and we're going to finish in Melbourne at Marvel Stadium for the 24th and 25th of November for the Australian GP. Now, those are all fine, but here's where we get some crossover. The opening round in Britain, 1st of July, well, that's Redbud. So, barrel. 22nd of July, the French GP, that's Washougal. The 14th of October, the German GP, which would be awesome to have the German world champion Ken Roczen at, and I'm sure he's going to be dying to be at that round. It's the finale of the Super Motocross Championship playoff series at the LA Coliseum. So how does this go? What do we see happen here? Does that world champion Ken Roczen for Supercross, who's just signed that HEP Suzuki deal, who actually coincidentally is the PMG or Pipes Motorsport Group in the World Supercross Series, do we see him drop out of the Super Motocross Series to go and do the German GP? I can't answer that. It's silly. It's unfathomable that if he makes it through all those AMA rounds, that he would miss the final round and miss out on all that money to go and do that one race in the German, which he would probably love to go and do because he's probably never had a German Supercross GP or just German Supercross worth his time that he can go and do. And not only can he then turn up and have the number one plate on as well, and I'm sure the World Supercross guys would pay him well to be there, but yeah, why did they do this? Like, why couldn't that 14th GP, and obviously there's more at play here, there's, stadium availability, government availability of dates for fundings for these World Supercross rounds and logistics of transport and so many other things. But why couldn't it be the week later once the Super Motocross Series is finished? It just doesn't make any sense. But it does obviously to somebody. But it's just not me. But it just would be nice if those dates could have been on slightly different days to allow them to be at both places. And I just don't see how that will ever happen because these two entities are going to keep fighting and playing tit for tat with each other. But yeah, that's my diatribe for this week here on the Always Moto podcast. All right, let's wrap up this show. We're going to make another mention about Pulp MX Fantasy League that's coming up. So we've got the Always Moto Fantasy League, as we spoke about with the Always Moto Contractor earlier in the show. But we are going to see, so we heard on the Pulp MX show itself the other night that there's going to be an announcement about the new series coming up here in the next few weeks. So please jump into the Always Moto League, use the password injury in lowercase and join our league. And you can play along with all of our Always Moto players. We're going to have prizes, as we mentioned earlier, as we have done in the past. But yeah, jump in, join the fun, and then we'll have a segment of it along the way. We're going to try and include some of the listeners out there and players out there in that along the way, as well as the Always Moto Contractor. So yeah, it's a bit of fun. Join the league, Always Moto Fantasy League on Pulp MX. All right, so great show this week. No interview, unfortunately. We're just going to wrap it up here. We just a reminder, next week I'm going for surgery, so there might be no show next week, but hopefully we'll be back the week after and we'll be getting some more content about those AMA injuries and potentially some other interviews along the way. So thanks for listening, guys and girls. Don't forget to send in those t-shirt orders. Don't forget to donate to the show via PayPal. Follow us on social media to stay up to date with all things injury in moto. Search Always Moto and then follow and subscribe. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast feed. Don't miss a single episode of the podcast. And make sure that if your podcast app allows, leave us a rating. It helps us gain more followers, gain more traction. So please leave a rating on your podcast app. It will mean the world to us. Thank you very much for doing that if you have already. And don't forget to check out all of our written content over on fullnoise.com.au. But that's it for another show. Thanks to Polar Australia and Slantboard Guy for the support. But remember, you've got to be smooth to be fast, because if you're not, I will probably be seeing you deep in the emergency department, maybe even the clinic, having strapping tape thrown wherever it sticks. See you later, guys and girls.